It is good to be back home. What a gift to be amongst you once more. I'll share later on this week what I did in my summer vacation. It was mostly a good time, although a little too hot and a little too much smoke. What does it mean when we say that Jesus was perfect? Today in the Gospel of Matthew, we hear of Jesus' encounter with the Canaanite woman. This is the same woman who in the Gospel of Mark is called the Syro-Phoenician woman. So in the Gospel of Mark, Mark is drawing on a geopolitical term to describe the woman whom Jesus meets. She lives in the region of Phoenicia, and that is under control of the Roman client state of Syria. So hence Syro-Phoenician. Here in the Gospel of Matthew, we hear that the same woman is a Canaanite woman, and this is an archaic or anachronistic term. And I don't mean archaic or anachronistic in 2026, but it's archaic and anachronistic in Jesus' time, referring to the historical or traditional enemies of Israel. The Canaanites are the people who Israel, going back several centuries, were at battle with. So if we were to try to put this passage into contemporary usage, imagine Jesus telling this story in 2026. In America, we could perhaps imagine him encountering someone who is a Confederate woman, or if we want to go back further than that, to the Revolutionary War, he's encountering someone who's a redcoat, right? So a suspicious outsider, an enemy. Although my hunch is that neither Confederate nor redcoat capture the flinch that we're supposed to engage in when we hear that this woman is a Canaanite, that there is more inherited history that Jesus and his friends are carrying, so that when, much as when in the Gospel of Luke, the Samaritans being also historical enemies, turns out to be a hero, that's supposed to confound us and do a double take. And so right off the bat, we're supposed to flinch a bit at Jesus encountering a Canaanite woman. And so maybe something that would capture a little bit more of the spirit here in Portland in 2026 is to say that Jesus meets a woman wearing a MAGA hat. That might give us the kind of reaction that we are looking for. So not the sort of thing you typically see on Portland streets, and for many of us, there's a whole set of assumptions that we immediately make about this person. So the Syro-Phoenician woman, the Canaanite woman, the MAGAite woman is who Jesus meets. And this woman has a daughter who is tormented by a demon. She has the ancient experience of a child in distress. And much like almost any parent anywhere across time, she will do anything to heal her child. And she's heard that Jesus is capable of healing, and she comes to him and says, "Lord, have mercy upon me," or in simpler language, help. And Jesus, seeing the hat, does what I do as I am driving around town and I see the person holding up the cardboard sign that says anything helps. I'm not proud of this, but I often act like they're invisible. I just keep on driving, and this is what Jesus does. He pretends that the woman is not calling out to him. But she keeps on going, "Have mercy upon me." She shouts over and over, and the disciples become uncomfortable. They become nervous. They're trying to have a nice lunch. They're trying to tell one another about this amazing show on Netflix that they just watched, and they are relentlessly interrupted. "Have mercy upon me. Have mercy upon me," they shout over and over. And eventually the disciples, in their exasperation, ask Jesus to do something. You've got to stop. You've got to stop this woman. And so Jesus kind of snaps. He goes. This is a blow up that I recognize from my own childhood. My father would go from no apparent to emotion to 100, to like flames coming out of his ears, and I'm sure it was building up inside of him. But from us on the outside, that 0 to totally angry was a startling thing. And Jesus snaps and he says to the woman, it's not fair to give the children's food to the dogs. The harshness of these words is startling. This is a backhand to the woman's face, almost physically painful words that he speaks. There is this slur in the words. The woman is like a dog. She is not even fully human. And we can imagine the disciples being startled and shocked by Jesus' words. Just a second ago, they were asking him to intervene, and now they can scarcely believe the cruelty with which he's spoken to this woman. But the woman still is undeterred. She still is determined to get help. And so she replies to Jesus. Perhaps she's used to being spoken to with cruelty. She says, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the scraps that fall under the master's table." And in that instant, this woman becomes the only person in any of the four Gospels to ever best Jesus in an argument. And Jesus, it's like the scales fall from his eyes. That's Paul's phrase, isn't it? He suddenly sees things in a new way. He realizes that God's love is more expansive than he had ever imagined, than the bigotries of his culture had taught him. And he says, "Woman, great is your faith." And her daughter is healed. And Jesus is suddenly opened up to a new possibility. He has a more generous and bigger and more loving lens for reality than he had just a few moments ago. At least that's how I read this story. You can find no shortage of commentators who are ready to argue that Jesus is not surprised when not bested in an argument, that he is kind of an Obi-Wan Kenobi character with Jedi mind tricks who is always 2 or 3 steps ahead of the conversation, that he's kind of this chess master who's saying things to test people, but he knows how the conversation is going to play out. And I get that people who make this argument are making it out of reverence to Jesus. They're making it out of deep love and abiding respect for Jesus. But I want to suggest that this argument, rooted in reverence, rooted in good intention though it is, accidentally confesses an ancient heresy. It's a heresy called Docetism. And for the Docetist, Jesus is not fully human. He is always at this divine remove. So for the Docetist, Jesus appears to be human, but never really suffers and never really encounters human emotion. He's kind of putting on the costume of being a human being. And that's not what we claim in Christian faith. The core to Christian faith is the claim that Jesus is fully divine and fully human. My read that Docetism is the most common heresy in American Christianity, that a lot of us talk about Jesus as though he did not fully share in the human experience. Years ago on Christmas Eve, I was speculating about Mary and Joseph with a newborn and what it was like to be middle of the night, and I said something like, imagine these two people on the road living under occupation, and it's 3 a.m. and they're caring for a barfy baby. And someone cornered me in the receiving line after the service and said, "Oh, I don't think that Jesus ever threw up because he was perfect." And I thought, is that what perfection is? Is it perfection to never have your gastrointestinal system malfunction in any way? I don't think it's sinful to have your body not work the way that you want it to sometimes. That's just part of being alive. This insistence that there's something imperfect about having a GI or having your body misbehave. Am I cutting in and out, Evelyn? Oh, okay. There's another microphone here. Oh, technology. The PA system too is imperfect. This suggestion that our bodies misbehaving in some way is evidence of imperfection or is sinful in some way refutes the claim at the start of Genesis that we're made in God's image, that God looks at our bodies and says they are very good. It refutes the promise of the incarnation, that God is made human and shares absolutely in our experience, that God is Emmanuel, God with us. And it invites us into a place of absurdity. Was Jesus born capable of speaking every language that had ever been invented? When Joseph began to teach him things, did he already know how to do all of the carpentry, but he was just pretending he didn't know to go along? Was he a piano virtuoso, even though the piano hadn't been invented yet? But if there had been a piano, he could have played that some kind of Yitzhak Perlman. Is Yitzhak Perlman a pianist? He's not. Okay, so that's a double problem then, isn't it? Like not only okay. Anyway, none of these things are a picture of a human being. These are stories out of a comic book, right? This is Superman lifting the car off of, I forget who gets pinned under the car in Jesus or in. There you go. There was a little Freudian slip in Clark Kent's childhood. And this brings us back to the question that I started us with. What does it mean? This is a core Christian claim, isn't it? That Jesus is perfect, that Jesus is without sin. What if to be perfect is to constantly be learning? That all the time Jesus is approaching the world with curiosity and humility. And so from his folks, he learns language, he learns the ancient faith that he has inherited from them, from the scribes we hear in the Gospel of Luke. He goes to the temple and has this argument, this precocious argument at age 12. He learns that part of the faith is arguing with other people of faith about where God is at work in the world. From Peter, he learns this earnest enthusiasm for faith. From his friends Mary and Martha, he learns about both service and about words. We could keep on plugging in examples. And from the Canaanite, Syrophoenician, Magaite woman, Jesus learns that God's kingdom is bigger than he ever imagined. He escapes from the bigotries that he learned, and perhaps that all of us learn when we grow up in a culture, that there are dangerous, impure outsiders, that there are villains who are not us. And he realizes that that is not and never was what God's kingdom looks like. Now, none of this is to engage, I want to be clear about this, in a moral relativism where everyone has an opinion and all opinions are equally valid. All opinions are not equally valid. Some opinions are quite mistaken in nature. There is such a thing as right and wrong. There is such a thing as good and evil. As somebody quipped, the answer to that question on the bracelet, what would Jesus do, is sometimes to make a whip and flip tables over. That can be a Christ-like answer to a question. So we're not at this sort of serene, opinionless perspective on reality. It is to say that within the recognition that good and evil exists, that part of choosing goodness is to choose curiosity, to choose humility, to choose to keep on learning, to be willing to say, there's things about which I might be wrong. I'm very sorry that one of our big accusations in politics and on Twitter is what we call flip-flopping, that someone had a perspective 5 years ago or 15 years ago, and now they have a different perspective. That's a good thing. If you have new data, if you have new experiences, if your heart has been opened in some way, and now you have a new perspective, that sounds like being a morally serious adult to me. That's a good thing that you now believe. Someone said a while back of the church that he grew up in, there was much that he loved about it, but he really struggled that one of the values was believing the same thing at age 40 or 70 or 90 that you had believed at age 12. And actually, that's some things I suppose you want to hold on to, but it's okay and good to change and to learn. If my hunch is right, if Jesus' perfection is learning all the time, always being open to possibility, a place where at my best I want to be, but often I am closed to new experiences, to new learnings. And if our call as Christians is to be Christ-like, to imitate Christ, what might that mean for us? What are you and I called to learn? Which people in our lives might be inviting us into surprise, into confounding us in a holy way with the insight they have to offer? Where might we discover that God is inviting us to learn about the kingdom, which is bigger and more beautiful and more loving and more generous than we've ever asked or imagined?